Profesor Dr. Engineer Insinyur Adi Maulana, ST, Magister Filosofi.
Yang terhormat, Wakil Rektor Bidang Kemitraan, Inovasi, Kewirausahaan, dan Bisnis Universitas Hasanuddin, Profesor Dr. Engineer Insinyur Adi Maulana, ST, Magister Filosofi.
The Honorable Dean Faculty of Law Universitas Hasanuddin, Profesor Dr. Hamzah Halim, SH, MH, MAP.
Yang kami hormati, Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Hasanuddin, Profesor Dr. Hamzah Halim, SH, MH, MAP.
The Honorable Guest Speaker of Studium Generale, Dr. Prosper S. Maguchu, LL.M. from Frey University.
Yang kami hormati, Pembicara tamu Studium Generale, Dr. Prosper S. Maguchu, LL.M. dari Frey University.
The Honorable Vice Dean, Head of Departments, Head of Study Programs, and also all participants who attend in this session.
Yang kami hormati, para Wakil Dekan, Ketua Departemen, Ketua Program Studi, serta seluruh peserta yang hadir pada acara hari ini.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya,
And good afternoon to all of us. Welcome to the Studium Generale with the theme, an overview of the crime of the corruption in light of the new criminal code, conducted by Faculty of Law Universitas Hasanuddin.
Selamat datang di Studium Generale dengan tema Tinjauan Tindak Pidana Korupsi ditinjau dari Kitab Undang-Undang Hukum Pidana Baru yang dilaksanakan oleh Fakultas Hukum Universitas Hasanuddin.
First of all, let us offer praise and gratitude for the presence of God because of His grace and mercy, so we can gather today in this event to attend the Studium Generale.
Pertama-tama, marilah kita panjatkan puja dan puji syukur kehadirat Tuhan yang Maha Esa. Karena atas rahmat dan berkah-Nya, kita dapat berkumpul pada hari ini untuk menghadiri Studium Generale.
Therefore, let us start the event together by reciting Basmalah.
Mari memulai acara ini dengan mengucapkan basmalah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcoming remarks by the Dean Faculty of Law Universitas Hasanuddin, Profesor Dr. Hamzah Halim, SHMH, MAP. Time is yours.
Sambutan oleh Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Hasanuddin, Profesor Dr. Hamzah Halim, SH, MH, MAP. Kepada Bapak, dengan hormat disilahkan.
Thank you, MC. Bagaimana suara saya bagus?
Dengar jelas.
Ya, baik. The Honorable Dr. Prosper S. Maguchu, LL.M. from Vrije University, Amsterdam, Netherlands. The Honorable Vice Rector for Partnership, Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Business, Profesor Dr. Engineering Insinyur Adi Maulana, ST, MPhil. The Honorable Vice Dean for Planning Resources and Alumni, Profesor Dr. Inkarita Sakarina. The Honorable Vice Dean for Partnership, Research, and Innovation, Dr. Ratnawati SH MH, the Honorable Lecturers of Law Faculty of Hasanuddin University, all students, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good afternoon and good morning to Dr. Prosper in Amsterdam. First of all, I would like to welcome back Dr. Prosper S. Maguchu from Vrije University, Netherlands, to our faculty. It's very nice to see you again. I'll do this time by virtual. A few months ago, Dr. Prosper visited us and we were very delighted to have run several academic activities together, including writing and publication, workshop, public lectures, and also sharing session with our students. We were very grateful for that. As for this semester, Dr. Prosper will also join us back as part of the teaching team, and we will also carry out joint research activities together in the near future. And on this occasion, we are going to have the first lecture together about an overview of the crime of corruption. It is a very interesting and important subject because corruption itself is a form of extraordinary crime due to its very destructive nature and detrimental effects. As law students, spearhead in eradicating this kind of criminal act in the future. Therefore, I hope that every student can absorb the information that will be given, interact actively, and take this opportunity to deepen their knowledge. Once again, we are humbly thanking Dr. Prosper for all your time and willingness to share the knowledge with you. I wish you all enjoy session. Thank you and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning to Dr. Prosper.
Waalaikumsalam.
Baik, terima kasih banyak atas sambutan yang diberikan.
Opening remarks by the Vice Rector in Partnership, Innovations, Entrepreneurship, and Business Hasanuddin University, Profesor Dr. Engineer Insinyur Adi Maulana, ST.M. Philosophy, and also to officially open the event. To Profesor Adi Maulana, time is yours.
Selanjutnya, sambutan oleh Wakil Rektor Bidang Kemitraan, Inovasi, Kewirausahaan dan Bisnis Universitas Hasanuddin, Profesor Dr. Insinyur Adi Maulana, ST Magister Filosofi, sekaligus membuka kegiatan ini secara resmi. Kepada Bapak, dengan hormat disilahkan.
Halo.
MC-nya diulangi deh.
Halo.
Ya, MC-nya diulangi.
Sorry, there is something problem with the connection.
Next, opening remarks by the Vice Rector in Partnership, Innovations, Entrepreneurship, and Business of Universitas Hasanuddin, Profesor Dr. Engineer Insinyur Adi Maulana, ST Magister of Philosophy, and officially open the event. Professor Adi Maulana, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our respected Dean of Faculty of Law, Hasanuddin University, Professor Hamza Halim, with all Vice Dean and lecturer from Faculty of Law. Our respected speakers today, we have Dr. Prosper as Maguchu from Vrije University, Amsterdam. Good morning in Amsterdam. Really thankful for your support for our university. I know that you already visited many times, or maybe you already visit to our university last time. And then we do appreciate your time and your constant support to our university, especially Faculty of Law. And then all participants, both online and offline. I hope we are all in a good condition and a good health. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Faculty of Law. And then I'm very happy today. It's my pleasure to attend the Studium Generale entitled An Overview of Crime of Corruption in Light of the New Criminal Code. The Studium Generale actually is a part of this Natalis Law Faculty of Hasanuddin University. We know that Law Faculty of Hasanuddin University is one of the oldest faculty in Hasanuddin University, and then Law Faculty has already produced so many experts in law in national and international level in Indonesia. Today's topic is very interesting. Why? Because we already know that Indonesian government and then the House of Representative or DPR has finally passed the new criminal code, or what we call KUHP last year, December. And then we already still, we realize that corruption in Indonesia has threatened so many aspects, social aspect, national, and then even the corruption has already influenced our lifestyle. And then corruption has also bring enormous material losses to state finance regarding economy and then society and also about culture. So I think we still have some issue related with the criminal system. And then, of course, we need sort of like a discussion. And then today, the Studium Generale is a kind of discussion, because we still need to prepare for future, and then in order to create a legislation system that is even better in the future. And then we know that we need a new criminal code in order to get a better condition in law enforcement. I do hope that today's Studium Generale will give us sort of like an insight, especially from our respected speaker today. We know that Netherlands is one of the most advanced country in the world in terms of law enforcement, in terms of criminal code. And then we do hope that today we will get some information which can contribute to our criminal code in Indonesia. Once again, I would like to say thank you very much for Dr. Prosper. Thank you very much for your time. On behalf of Rector or President of Hasanuddin University, let me formally open the Studium Generale by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim on behalf of our leader of university. Let's get to the Studium Generale, and then I do hope that today this is not the final. I mean, this is not the last time for Dr. Prosper to support us, to give us some sort of like new idea exchange. I think that's all from me, and then thank you very much for Dr. Prosper, and then enjoy the Studium Generale. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Prof. Adi.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Prosper will be as or adjunct professor in Law Faculty Hasanuddin University.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Prosper. I will be more than happy to give you the endorsement. And then I think Faculty of Law is one of the faculty in Hasanuddin University which has already so many adjunct professor. And then by joining adjunct professor in law faculty, I think that Faculty of Law will become more stronger in the future.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prosper. Yeah. Please, if you visit Hasanuddin University, I really want to see you and then discuss so many things.
Indeed, I will also be looking forward to meeting with you this year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Engineer Insinyur Adi Maulana, ST Magister of Philosophy, for your remarks and willingness to open the Studium Generale under the theme An Overview of the Corruption in Light of the New Criminal Code. The opening remarks from the Vice Rector of Universitas Hasanuddin also become a sign of the end of the opening ceremony.
Terima kasih kepada Bapak Profesor Dr. Insinyur Adi Maulana ST, Magister Filosofi atas sambutan dan kesediaan untuk membuka Studium Generale dengan tema Tinjauan Tindak Pidana Korupsi ditinjau dari Kitab Undang-Undang Hukum Pidana Baru. Dengan berakhirnya sambutan dari Bapak Wakil Rektor Universitas Hasanuddin tadi, sekaligus menutup rangkaian pembukaan acara pada hari ini.
That was the opening ceremony. Here we are going to the main agenda of today's event, which is material presentations of Studium Generale by this distinguished speaker, Dr. Professor Prosper S. Maguchu, LL.M. This agenda will be led by Mrs. Arnita Pratiwi Arifin, SH LL.M. as the moderator.
Itulah tadi acara pembukaan Studium Generale menuju agenda utama kegiatan hari ini, yakni pemaparan materi Studium Generale oleh Dr. Prosper S. Maguchu, LL.M. Agenda ini akan dipimpin oleh Ibu Arnita Pratiwi Arifin, SH LL.M.
Without any further ado, we would like to call Mrs. Arnita Pratiwi Arifin, SH LL.M. to moderate the session.
Untuk itu, kami mengundang Ibu Arnita Pratiwi Arifin, SH LL.M. untuk memoderati sesi kali ini. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you very much for the Master of Ceremony. First of all, I would like to say welcome back, Dr. Prosper Maguchu. How are you, Dr. Prosper?
Doing great, thank you.
Okay, we are very delighted to see you again, although this time virtually, and we are very grateful for your willingness to present today's materials. Currently, we have approximately 150 students attending in this room right now. I hope you can, the camera will show them to you later as we progress to the materials. And then before we start the class, please allow me to introduce our speaker, Dr. Prosper, to the student participants. Okay. Dr. Prosper Simbarasa Maguchu is an experienced researcher and lecturer with a demonstrated history of working in the civil society and higher education industry. Since 2019, Simbarasa has been lecturing at the Faculty of Law at Vrije University, Amsterdam, and Amsterdam University College and Center. He is a subject matter expert on corruption and human rights with the African Union and has recently been engaged in the UN Special Rapporteur. Dr. Prosper attained his doctor juris from the University of Gießen, Germany, and he also has many teaching experiences in some other notable universities such as University of Groningen, University of Marburg, and University of Gießen, Germany. And furthermore, he is also currently guest teaching in the University of Indonesia, University of Al-Azhar, Indonesia, and currently Hasanuddin University as well. Therefore, without further ado, I will invite our Dr. Prosper to deliver the material. Dr. Prosper, you have approximately 1 hour to present your materials, and then we have 30 minutes for the Q&A session. And then, yes, without further ado, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And well, we'll get to the time issue. But first of all, let me really express my gratitude. It is always an honor to be back at UNHAS. This is by far my favorite university of all the universities I've been in the past and present. So I always looking forward to giving a presentation here and also, you know, interacting with colleagues, my brother here, Professor Halim. I met also today, Professor Maulana, and you, of course, Anita, we've always been exchanging emails. And of course, my very special host, Professor Latif. Yeah, so I'm really excited also to be in the presence of colleagues. So I don't really feel like it's a guest lecture really, because I'm already part of the team and the family. Maybe next time we just put it as a lecture on corruption or a lecture on money laundering. Then now getting to the core business of today. So today's lecture, corruption and the new criminal code, is very important, very timely and relevant for two reasons. Indonesia has passed the first post-colonial criminal code in 2022. Is it December, if I'm not mistaken? Last year in December 2022.
It's January 2023.
Oh, January 2023. Okay, but it was out in December because I know that it generated enormous debate at the Faculty of Law here in the Netherlands. Everyone was discussing the provisions of the code in December. Okay, but it came into effect in January 2023. Thank you for that correction. So this is a very key milestone. We know that the history of codification is already 1,000 or so many years old. I would have loved to make a short quiz to ask students if they know which was the first codification of law. Who knows the first codification of law? When was it or who passed it? If the camera can turn to our students, just a short quiz to help us to get started. Let's see. Yeah. When was the first codification of law?
Ada yang tahu kapan pertama kali kodifikasi hukum itu di apa?
And don't
Indonesia?
cheat, please. Make sure that, no, the first codification of law.
Ada yang tahu KUHP itu mulai diundangkan tahun berapa?
Okay, fine. I will save you this so that because I know time is already limited. And once I start speaking, I get also very excited and usually don't finish. But anyway, the first codification of law was by the Code of Hammurabi. The Code of Hammurabi in what is now Iran. So the Persian king, they started the first code of law, which was on stone, on a tablet, a rock tablet, put it in a big marketplace where everybody could read and see that this is the code of law. So no one could say, I did not know that the act that I committed is a crime because it is written for everybody to see. Although some other dubious leaders would write the codes in very small font and put it very high up where it would be difficult to see, but that's a discussion for another day. So the first codification, post-colonial codification of Indonesia, so that is a very important aspect. And secondly, the issue of corruption, this lecture is sort of an introduction of what we plan or intend to do later this year. We are also going to then discuss and research a little bit more on corruption in India, in Indonesia rather, because so far the little knowledge that we have, especially on corruption in Indonesia, is based on perceptions that are collected mainly by international organizations. So as at UNAS, we have in the pipeline an idea to carry out further studies on corruption. To the best of my knowledge, we have quite a very good center on anti-corruption. So this now actually is a good transition now to show you how I'm going to structure today's presentation. And Anita, if you can allow me to share my screen so that I can share my slides, or if you want to share them that side, either way.
Yes, you can directly share your screen.
Okay.
Okay. Or if you, okay.
Then let me now make the slides bigger. What is happening here? Okay, I need to take away this and this. And how do I make my slides bigger? Like this.
You can, yes.
Good. Now it's fine, right? Okay, good. And if you can just confirm if you can see my page 2, which is an overview. Hello, Anita, can you confirm if you all can
Yes, we
see
can
my
all
page 2?
see your presentation right now.
Okay, that's good. All right, excellent. So I will begin. So I've structured this presentation in 4 parts because this is quite a huge topic. Discussing the crime of corruption within the context of the Indonesian Criminal Code is something that could take us even a whole course, a whole semester course. But I've tried to cluster it into 4 different aspects that I think are very germane to the work that we intend to do later this year. So there's the introduction and defining corruption part, so that we are all the same level of understanding. So I want to begin with this introduction. Then secondly, we will look at different understandings and approaches in understanding, determining the aspect of corruption. So what are the different approaches and other methods that have been devised to understand this quite elusive concept that is corruption? This is the second part of the presentation. I will then go into the effects of corruption, just briefly try to explain a little bit, highlight the impact of corruption. Finally, we will then finish today's session with a little bit more on measuring corruption. So everything, I'm just going to touch the main features. It's going to be like 4 crash courses. Like we are going to have crash courses in introduction, different approaches, effects of corruption, and measuring corruption. In between, we will also have some exercises. I hope you have received the lesson sheet, the lesson outline that I shared yesterday. So you could also refer to this even after this today's session, because I subscribed some reading material. So in between, we will also have some exercises. And we are also going to begin with a little bit of exercise, but I'll get into that on the next slide. And then one more point, this is like on a housekeeping rule. Please, should you feel that I'm speaking too fast, just raise your hand, and Anita here can help me. If there's someone who is raising their hand, just let me know so that I can respond to them. Also, I'm not able now to check the chat box. So if anyone who is joining online and wants to make a contribution, or you have something burning that you cannot wait until the end of the slides, just send your question or contribution via the chat box. And Anita, too, can you also help me monitoring those participants joining online?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is our overview. Any objections so that we proceed? Okay, I guess there are none. Then I want us to begin with an exercise. So this exercise was supposed to take us 10 minutes, but in the interest of time, I'm going to reduce it to 5 minutes. And Anita, you're also going to help me with time management here. So
Okay.
I can see that we are sitting in rows there. If we can just in one row, if we can in one row, just to form a group. And in this group, I want us to, by consensus, try to come up with a definition of corruption. So let's choose one person who will be our rapporteur in these small groups, and then come up with a definition of corruption. If we don't agree, let's just point out why we didn't agree and what we believed or was discussed as the definition of corruption. So we all have 5 minutes to do this. 5 minutes. By 4:42, we should be back. So let's do this quickly. And those who are present in the room, you can help me with monitoring the students. So let's do it. Is it clear? The question is clear?
I will translate it in Bahasa to make it more clearer to them.
Okay, thanks. Please, let's do that in 5 minutes.
Jadi untuk di setiap row itu secara berkelompok, tolong kalian rumuskan satu pengertian tentang korupsi yang kalian buat secara berkelompok itu. Ya, ya coba. Ya silakan. You have 5 minutes. 5 menit ya untuk diskusikan tentang pengertian korupsi. Ya, dan akan saya tunjuk satu kelompok untuk mempresentasikan tentang ininya. Ya, bahasa Inggris juga lebih bagus supaya Dan kalau ada yang mau bertanya, bisa langsung join di Zoom dan chat box ya. Kalau misalnya agak nervous bertanya langsung, ya, biar untuk memudahkan juga Dr. Prosper memeriksa pertanyaannya kalian dan menjawabnya. Nah, sudah ada linknya? Belum ya? Nanti akan di forward ke grup masing-masing.
We have 2 minutes to go. Our timekeeper, I think we must be on time.
Yes, okay. I think all of them mostly have finished. Yeah.
Okay, good. How many groups did we have?
We have approximately 1, 2, 3. Is in 15? 15? Oh, 7?
7 groups.
Oops.
All right, so. All right,
I
so
think
quick.
it's more than 10.
Oh, more than 10. All right, so let's have volunteers. Which group wants to volunteer their answer? You have about a minute to present what you discussed.
Okay, ada yang mau volunteer? Silakan. Ayo. Ayo, angkat tangan.
Yeah, just give them the microphone and then we.
Silakan. Ada yang mau? Kelasku. Yes, okay. We have a volunteer. Okay.
Yeah, good. I can see there's a volunteer there.
Yes. We're just going to give her microphone. Okay, your name and yes, just your name.
Boleh minta tolong ditranslatekan, Bu.
Okay.
Baik, terima kasih buat kesempatannya. Perkenalkan, nama saya Anastasia Evelyn dari kelas Delik-Delik di luar kodifikasi kelas Y. Korupsi adalah tindak pidana yang dilakukan oleh seseorang atau beberapa orang yang berada dalam kekuasaannya dengan tujuan untuk menguntungkan diri sendiri atau kelompok tertentu. Mungkin hanya itu, sekian dan terima kasih.
Dalam kekuasaannya apa tadi? Can you repeat that?
Berada dalam kekuasaannya, Bu.
Terus?
Dengan tujuan untuk menguntungkan diri sendiri atau suatu kelompok tertentu.
Okay. Dr. Prosper, she come up with her group one proposal that corruption is a criminal act committed by a person or several people who are in his power with the aim of benefiting themselves and other party related.
Okay.
Any
Okay, good.
other
And
volunteer?
Mm.
Any other volunteer? Silakan. Yang lain? Ayo. Yes, okay. Your name, please. Kak Alif tawa syuting. Yes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Nurpati Ariskia dari kelas Delik-Delik luar kodifikasi kelas A. Okay, for us, corruption is an act that is rodent, dishonest, and associated with finance matters that harms others. Thank you.
Okay, interesting. Rotten finances hurts others.
Yes. Another
Okay.
volunteer, please. Okay.
And
The
one more, please. One
Yes,
more, and then
one
we
more.
close.
Okay. Your name, please. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Muhammad Alif Tausar. So my opinion about corruption. Corruption is an act where the action takes away someone's right to enrich themselves. Thank you.
Very good, interesting. Thank you so much. I would really have loved to listen to all the group discussions. Maybe if you have written them down, please pass them to Ibu Anita, and then please you can share with me. Maybe we'll use them in the latest lectures. So I can just highlight the major issues pointed out here. Although there's no consensus, you can see these three definitions are completely different. Day and night, the difference is quite stark. So the other one was emphasized, the first one emphasized on criminal element. So they say corruption is a criminal element, a criminal act committed by those in power. So there's criminality, power, and personal benefit. That was the first definition. In the second definition, the second group, they talked about something very interesting, if I heard it correctly, rotten, and also included finances and hurt element. So they said it hurt others. So there's an element of injuring other people by corruption. Also very interesting, and I like that definition. And the final one, of course, also quite short, precinct, but very telling. It says violating the rights of others. Was that, yeah? So put it differently, corruption is a violation of the rights of others. Very interesting. Thank you so much for all your definitions. By the way, all these definitions, they are not very far from what has been defined as corruption universally all over the world. There's not been a single, accepted definition of corruption. So there is no consensus when it comes to defining corruption. So what we will do in the next, let me just give 10 minutes, maybe dedicate 10 minutes on this part. What we are going to do is to discuss the baseline definition. So by baseline, I mean, this is the ground zero definition where we start from if you want to understand this very difficult animal that is called corruption. Then after understanding that, if you have any questions, I'll clear them. And then we get a bit into more deeper understanding of the meaning of corruption. And I also want us to tap into the moral and civic virtue so that we understand exactly what corruption is. As the second group says, it's rotten, so they talked about rotten. So we also want to get that part of how exactly, why do we say something is rotten? So there must be some moral elements to the definition of corruption, right? And by the way, we are actually writing a paper, myself and Ibu Latif, we are also writing a paper on how the Panchasila values can be an antidote to corruption, but we'll discuss that in another session. Okay, good. So let's start with the definition, the baseline definition. This is what you mostly find. Let's say you just open a dictionary, an English dictionary, a proper English dictionary will tell you that corruption is dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power. So almost similar to the first group. So there's dishonest, fraudulent conduct by people in power. It could also be expanded in some other dictionaries as, any illegal behavior. Fraud is only one specific crime. For instance, you wrote a document, you are given a check and you put an extra zero so that you claim 10 million when you were only entitled to 1,000 rupiah, and you put extra zeros and you go and claim 10 million. That's fraudulent, right? So you have made a document to lie about itself. But illegal behavior can mean so many things. So it can mean taking a bribe. It can mean embezzlement, stealing what you are entitled to keep in trust of others. So they expand it a little bit, but this is still a basic definition. And they also emphasize that powerful people, not only people in power, powerful people. So sometimes people in power could be taken to mean those people who are working for the government. So people who are working for the state. But powerful people could also mean not only people working for the state, but people who have power by virtue of having businesses, people in private sector, or people also in civil society. People who are leading religious organizations. They can also be powerful people and could also abuse their power, illegally or act dishonestly. So this is the baseline definition of corruption. Any questions on this one?
Ada yang mau bertanya tentang pengertian korupsi? No?
No questions. All right, let's move to the next. So this fits almost barely with what has been discussed by the first group. But you can already see something really difficult. So because this definition does not really exactly tell us what corruption really is. It will be difficult to go to court and say that, somebody is just dishonest. You need more, right? Let's also now look at, criminal code. So usually the law is the best place where you can look for a proper definition. So we have the Indonesian Criminal Code, KUHP. I forgot how to say this in Bahasa, but KUHP 2022. You said now it's 2023, so I have to correct that one. It does refer to corruption as corrupcy, which is quite fascinating because then corrupcy, the etymology of this word, corrupcy, is actually has its roots in a Latin word, which is corruptio, or corrumpere. That was the original Latin word where we derive the word corrupcy, corruption, or as it is written in various other languages, but it is actually a derivative term from the Latin word corrupsi, which means decay or destroy. So destroy, destruction, as my brother here, Professor Dean has also mentioned that, corruption has destructive effect. So corruption has destructive effect. It was seen as a distraction in itself, in and of itself. But again, we should understand this within the context of the time. So this is way back when, philosophers coined this term. If let's say if a regime is corrupt, this would lead to its destruction. Then there will come another regime. Let's say maybe the Romans would then get corrupted and then they will be destroyed. Then we have the Ottoman Empire, got so big, corrupted, destroyed, overtaken by another tribe. So corruption was destructive then. So this is the context of thousands of years ago. And now in 2022, 2023, we also have the same corruption in Indonesian criminal code. But of course, now we should understand that not all forms of corruption, for example, can be destruction or can lead to destroy. I will want to take a little bit, like let's say, for instance, you want to go abroad and you apply for a passport. You live in a country where it's very difficult to get a passport and you have got a scholarship. You want to go abroad and somebody asked you that if you pay me 1 million rupiah, then you can have your passport. So in this case, corruption would lead to you getting a passport and going abroad to study. So it could actually be seen as a positive corruption by others. But far from it, of course, nothing is called positive corruption. There is survival corruption. Nonetheless, it still is corruption. So these are some of the definitions that we have. So from that basic one, but we also have corruption. And again, I want us to just to explain a little bit on the law. So even we have the criminal code, we also have other legal statutes that should be passed under the criminal code to define corruption. And this can get very complex and technical. So sometimes it becomes very difficult to understand exactly what are the boundaries, what are the elements of the crime of corruption. Also, more importantly, what is written and what then transpires in courtroom are two different things. So the law, as we know, writing the law, we cannot cover when the politicians write the law in parliament. They cannot cover for every specific situation. They are what are called legal blind spots. So the legal blind spots, imagine you are driving a car. If you look in the rearview mirror, you cannot see everything behind you. Sometimes you have to turn your back so that you can see if there is a car coming from behind. So these are legal blind spots. So when they are drafting the law, legislators, what they do is that they make certain elements too general and broad to cover any other aspects that may come up in the future. And they give room for judges to then interpret the code. The criminal code will then be interpreted by judges to at least try to come to the intention that the legislature had when they drafted the criminal code. So that can always give rise to some challenges. It's not always straightforward. So we'll now have some difficulties on exactly what is corruption here, or what is not corruption, what is really punished, what is not punished. So all this makes the definition of corruption quite very difficult. It's very difficult to pin it down to say, here is the definition of corruption that is cast in stone. Where else should we refer to then? We also have international law. We have the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, of which Indonesia is a party to. Almost all the countries in the world. It has more than 180 states that have signed and ratified this convention, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which has come up with this novel genius idea that they do not define corruption as such, but what they did was to come up with certain number of acts. So they agreed on a number of acts, which they could then say, these are corruption, or these are rotten. These are acts that can hurt others, to borrow from the second group when they spoke about hurting others. So they come up with a list of crimes, and I've just rushed through them. I hope I'm still within the 10 minutes. I want to finish this part and move to the next other exciting parts. So there is bribery, and I hope you know what bribery is. Bribery is you pay somebody else, money to do you a favor. There is embezzlement. Embezzlement is basically theft. So you steal something that you are entitled to keep in trust. So you put all your money in a bank, the Reserve Bank or bank officials should be keeping this money safe for you, but they are in the habit of taking that money. That's embezzlement. Trading in influence. You use your position to gain information to sell it to others. So for money. Abuse of functions can happen in so many ways. Illicit enrichment, quite interesting, because this crime is regarded as against the criminal principles. So if somebody is rich, you start driving a really nice sport car, a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, or you start owning a holiday house in Bali. You also have another apartment in Jakarta, but your salary does not really amount to all that. Your salary is quite basic salary. So you can be asked to explain yourself. How did you acquire so much wealth? So that is a crime of enrichment. So it can be actually be a crime in certain countries to be too rich in commensurate to your salary. So if you become too extra rich and your salary doesn't really justify, that can also be a crime. You have to justify yourself to explain how you got that money. There's money laundering, and I'm going to discuss money laundering in the next session. And there's also concealment, obstruction of justice. These are crimes that are related to all the above. So these are different acts, criminal acts that have been proposed by the UNCEC as the very basic. Each state, like Indonesia, is free to expand from this definition. So this will be part of the homework to see if Indonesia, the criminal code, how far has it gone in terms of domesticating these crimes, because Indonesia is part of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. It has signed and ratified it. And you know that international principle puncta santi servanda, it means Indonesia is under an obligation to make sure that it has criminalized those core crimes of the UNCAC and optionally also to criminalize other crimes such as illicit enrichment, depending, of course, with its constitutional provisions. But we'll get into that. If you have any questions, just note them down and we can discuss that. So this was about the basic understanding of corruption. I will close this section on the basic understanding by giving two most cited definitions. So there are two definitions that have become almost common, popular. One is by the World Bank. So the World Bank in 97, and this definition is still being used today. They say corruption is use of public office for private gain. Interesting. So any challenges with this? What do you think about this definition? Can we turn to the students again, just any volunteer? Corruption is use of public office for private gain. What is wrong with this definition?
Ada yang mau berkomentar tentang pengertian yang diberikan oleh Bank Dunia, ya, World Bank, bahwa korupsi itu adalah penggunaan public office untuk kepentingan pribadi. Misal public office itu maksudnya apa sih? Kejabatan, ya. Ada yang mau memberikan masukan ininya, pendapatnya? Silakan. Setuju tidak dengan pengertiannya? Anyone? Okay. I think you may proceed for now, Dr. Prosper.
Okay, there was no volunteer. All right. Sorry. Hello. Okay. Was there any answer? None.
None at the moment.
None. Oh, okay. All right. That's fine. So I would take it that the students are really absorbing this. So the definition, you see, this was a very long time ago. Now we have private organizations, even private businesses. For example, do you know that maybe if we take one company like Shell, you know, Shell, the one that provides fuel, or Google or Apple, yeah, the most basic company, Walmart, they have finances that are far much bigger than any other country. They are even richer than states. They are richer than Indonesia if you take the annual profits, revenue of these big companies. So we now have private companies that have also become very rich. Apart from that, we also now have private organizations that are now doing work that initially was done by public service. So if you come to the Netherlands, Europe, for example, there are some prisons now that are being run by private companies. So if you go to prison, the government will take you to a private prison that is run by a person like myself. So we now have also people engaged in work that used to be public. The same goes with the provision of basic services such as electricity, water supply, and others. So now the distinction between a public and a private official is no longer relevant. So this definition is very narrow. It doesn't capture all forms of corruption. But we also now have Transparency International. They've come up with another definition that seems to be a bit broader. So it talks about, if you look in the fourth bullet point I have here, which says corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. So somebody also talked about personal gain, that's private gain. So it's entrusted power. It can be public, it can be private power, it can be by either a private or public official, but there is abuse of entrusted power. But again, this definition also does have its shortfalls, which I will not really delve into now, but at least it tries to capture a little bit some aspects of private corruption. So this is as far as we have in terms of the baseline or basic understanding of corruption. Now, a little bit on the deeper meaning of corruption. Unless if there are questions, then I can delve into point 2. Do we have any questions? Anyone who wants any explanation on the slides that I've just mentioned?
Ini memberikan komentar tentang yang telah disampaikan tentang pengertian korupsi. Silakan. Ada? Jangan khawatir kalau mau pakai bahasa Indonesia, nanti saya translatekan. Okay? Anyone? None at the moment, Dr. Prosper.
Okay. Now we may have to go and just force people to speak. But anyway, let's look a little bit on the deeper meaning of corruption. So by taking stock of different understanding of corruption, we can then develop an integrated awareness and full understanding of the challenge. Because one of the problems that we are facing today, excuse me, why it is difficult to deal with corruption, it's because we don't really understand it. So if you look year after year, if you follow, for example, Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index, Indonesia sometimes is performing better, sometimes it goes down, it's just fluctuating. But most countries are not performing very well. So each year, even those that traditionally are regarded as non-corrupt, their points are getting down. It's because we don't have a fuller understanding of the phenomenon of corruption. So it's useful that instead of just sticking to these international definitions provided by the World Bank, provided by Amnesty International, we should also dig deep within our own resources to try to understand what corruption means to us. What corruption means, for example, in Indonesia or even in Makassar. It may be different from what it means in Washington, DC. And I'll also show some example. One way of, there are three different ways in which we can try to understand, to have a deeper understanding of corruption. The first one is to look at politics. You know, that's where everything rotten happens there, to get from the second group. So in politics, so we have certain areas, you know, that may be regarded as corruption, or certain acts that are, although not even criminalized, may also hurt others or may violate the rights of others, to take the definition that was given by group 3. So I'll give an example of a common example like vote buying or electoral rigging, electoral fraud. That is clearly a terrible thing. It's bad. It's also almost criminalized, I think, in many jurisdictions. Yeah, vote buying may be different. Sometimes you give someone a gift for them to vote you. You give them a T-shirt that may be seen as, okay, no problem. But then if that T-shirt really influences that person to vote for you, that of course is vote buying. It really doesn't matter how much the gift was. What is important is, has that gift influenced the other person, the recipient, into making a decision? So vote buying could be another issue. But we also have other difficult areas such as lobbying. I don't know how many of you know about political lobbying, but political lobbying, this is where basically you pay people who are called lobbyists to have access to politicians or to change policies or to draft a new different law, etc. So in the United States, for example, if you want to meet with President Joe Biden, you can pay 1 million to somebody and they can arrange for you to have a meeting with him for like 30 minutes or 10 minutes. So that's called lobbying. But of course, if you are to do it in other countries, that is illegal. That's not allowed. So we also need to understand politically, what are these other forms? How can they also influence the behavior of others to act corruptly or to make others decay, for lack of a better word? Okay, and then economy. Another important aspect is to look at the economy if you really want to have a deeper understanding of corruption, because it is also about the costs and benefits. So when I'm talking about the costs and benefit, we are trying to understand what is it that motivates people to act in a corrupt way. What are the costs? What are the benefits? What are the chances of being arrested? So if you know that I can easily bribe in Makassar without anybody arresting me, there are no costs. It's just benefits. Also, what are the benefits of, you know, paying a bribe so that I get my passport and go abroad to study? What is the prison sentence, if there is a prison sentence? I know countries like China, they have death penalty for corruption. So if you steal or embezzle in China, you can be hanged. The same day you get the punishment, you can actually be hanged for being corrupt. But of course, that is also not even reducing corruption. There is still corruption in China, even though they can, you know, you can be hanged for being corrupt. So also that's another aspect, to try to look at the cost benefit, what motivates people, or what demotivates people from being corrupt. If we increase salaries of public officials, do they act corruptly, or they will shun corruption? So that's another way of getting a deeper understanding of corruption. And finally, we have to look at culture. This issue of culture has been said many times. Sometimes I'm a bit hesitant talking about it. You know, coming from Africa myself, I know and I've read certain books written about how people coming from African backgrounds, from Asian backgrounds, are more corrupt than their Western counterparts. I don't know how many of you have read this, but they believe that some of our culture, some of our norms, they say they promote corruption. It is scientifically that is now become a myth. It's not really true, but you can check some really convincing writings on that. On the other hand, there is also the idea that, most of these provided the so-called best practices in terms of fighting corruption are just Western, cultural values that are being imposed on countries like Indonesia, countries in Africa, countries in Latin America, to act in a way that is foreign to them. So that's another important aspect that we need to understand when it comes to corruption. Also the cultural background, because it really does play a very important role when it comes to what is corruption and what is not corruption. I'll close this part with just one anecdote. For instance, in my culture, of the Shishona people in the southern part of Africa, if you go before a traditional leader who is also an adjudicator, a judge in a local court, traditional court, you have to give a gift. So you give the gift to the judge before the matter commences. But this happens in full glare of the public. Everybody can see the gift being given to the leader, and it's not regarded as corruption. But if you are to give a judge at the ICC or in a modern court something as a present, that of course will be regarded as corruption. But so we have to look at culture and the significance of these gifts and so forth and so on to have a deeper understanding of corruption. So those are three other aspects that can help us at least to understand corruption. With this, I end the first part of our presentation. And Anita, how are we doing in terms of time?
We still have approximately 20 minutes.
Okay. That's really good.
Yes.
And I want to now, any questions? We really should have questions. Let's have the camera focus on the students.
Okay.
Can we have, yes, can we have some questions, contributions?
Silakan kalau ada yang mau bertanya tentang pengertian ya tolong pergunakan kesempatan ini untuk bertanya, apalagi beliau adalah ahli korupsi di di Belanda ya. Jadi tolong dipergunakan kesempatan ini untuk bertanya ya. Ada yang mau? Tentang pengertian dulu aja deh. Ya, silakan. Yes. Okay. We have one student who wants to ask you a question.
Yes, sure.
Your name, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Muhammad Bintang. About the culture, mungkin bisa bahasa Indonesia, Bu. Tadi dikatakan ada yang mereka kenal di daerah Afrika itu give to give. Mungkin hampir sama dengan budaya sebagian orang Indonesia yang bisa dikatakan sebagai money politik. Apakah titik penting sehingga money politik atau give to give tadi itu sehingga digolongkan menjadi salah satu cabang daripada korupsi, begitu, Bu?
Ada apa tadi?
Apa inti dari money politik itu sehingga digolongkan menjadi salah satu bagian dari korupsi? Terima kasih, Bu.
Dr. Prosper, the question is regarding your explanation that in African culture there is a culture which is it's give to give, as you mentioned earlier, then it is almost the same with the culture in Indonesia. And we often regard it as political money. Like, what do you think is the core of the money politics, so it can be regarded as the corruption itself?
Yes. So if I understand correctly, is political gifts, are these gifts or political money, is it corruption? Are we corrupting the politicians when we give them money? Yeah, very good question. Yeah, gift giving. Okay, gift giving, very common in most cultures, especially non-Western cultures. It's the same, by the way, in the Middle East, it's the same. The thing here is we have to look at the context. and transparency. Another important thing with defining corruption, the elements, is all about transparency. It's about accountability. Also, the other aspects that we have mentioned there. So if gifts are given, or even if money is given to a politician, by the way, elections, they cost money. They cost really serious money. If this money is declared, let's say, in a central place where it's known that Mohammed has paid Mr. Maguchu for running for local council 1 million euros, and it's there, it's written, that is clear, it's transparency. But if it comes via dubious means, where you also have Mohammed, when I'm successful in power, and you now try to get some contracts, I give you contracts so that you recover not only the 1 million you gave me, but also extra money you make from the contracts that I will now give you as a politician. That in itself is corruption and can hurt the rights of others, can hurt, it's for private gain. So this is just an arrangement between the two of us. And to go back to the African definition, for example, a public gathering in a court session in African setup, a court session is a village, it's communal, everyone has to come, and people will also probably have to eat. So if you give a gift in public, that gift, it could be a goat, it can be slaughtered, and people who come to listen to the case will also, take part and share the goat. So in that way, it's not necessarily corruption because this is for everybody. So if you promote, if there's no problem with you donating money for political cause, but if it's done transparently, it's recorded, and you don't expect something that we call, scratch my back, I scratch your back, that can now be regarded as corruption. I hope I've answered this in a short way. But again, this is still a very debatable issue in many countries on political donations, how to regulate political donations so that they don't end up being corruption. Okay.
Ada tanggapan? Okay. Yes, you may proceed.
All right, good. So for the second part, I had already also sort of come up. Oh, I think we still have other things. I will jump and then I'll just go straight to the effects of corruption. So here the idea was I wanted us to watch this short video, but even this, although it's short, it still takes more than half of our time that's remaining. And I wanted us to do another exercise to discuss what do we think about the super reach of corruption. But I'll give students a few minutes, maybe just 1 or 2 minutes to discuss what are the effects of corruption. What do you think are the effects of corruption?
Okay.
Yeah. Good. Let's just proceed. Yeah, I know that there was, when we discussed the first exercise, they talked about the impact that corruption can have. If we can just have 2 or 3 volunteers to discuss the effects of corruption. Again, let's have our students.
Oke, ada yang mau memberikan tanggapannya tentang apa menurut kalian efek dari korupsi? Silakan. I will welcome 2 or 3 volunteers. Ada yang mau, silakan. Apa menurut kalian efek yang ditimbulkan dari tindak pidana korupsi? Jawab dengan your common sense aja. Ada? Ya, silakan. Your name, please.
Mana? Siapa?
Yang yes.
Menurut saya efek yang paling menonjol dari korupsi adalah kemiskinan. Karena korupsi dapat memperburuk kemiskinan karena uang dan sumber daya yang seharusnya digunakan untuk membantu orang miskin dan membangun infrastruktur publik seringkali disalahgunakan oleh pejabat korupsi. Hal ini menurut saya merupakan efek yang paling menonjol dalam tindak pidana korupsi.
Oke. Bisa diulang satu kali. Yes. Okay. So Dr. Prosper, one of our students mentioned that the most prominent effect is poverty. The money that should goes to the white community is often used to for the personal gain. So it creates more poverty to the society itself.
Okay, yes, that's true. If we don't have many others, let's just go straight into the to the discussion. Do
Ada
we
yang
have?
Anyone else? Silakan. Yuk.
Okay, thank you. That was a brilliant one. But I really beg you, so if you share the slides with the students, they should really watch this part and maybe still do an exercise amongst themselves. It's a very interesting exercise, and the video is also quite fantastic. It tells you more, some of the surprising effects that corruption can have on the society in our communities that we don't usually hear about we don't get this in literature or in the news. So for the purposes of today's lecture, very quick one, I will just highlight some of the effects of corruption. And I've also decided to put them into classes, political, economic, as well as social. I will not go very much deeper into the explanation. I'll just highlight some of them. And to those who are really interested in understanding, for example, how corruption can lead to poverty, like our speaker has just said, our previous contributor has just said, then you can always refer to this and the reading material that I've also subscribed. So when it comes to political, for example, and I'll just rush through, corruption can lead to what we call, some personal loss. Although you may not sometimes feel, but there's some personal loss, there is intimidation and some inconveniences that corruption can create politically, especially for those who are political players or are involved in politics. There is also the public and private sector dysfunctionality. If an example of systemic corruption in the public sector, in let's say procurement, can make things so difficult. You don't even know who to go to if you want to purchase certain things, because it's only those who are connected who have access to, systems. So it can lead to dysfunctionality. And more clearly, corruption can rig, economics and political systems. So instead of voting for a party, you vote and your votes are kept somewhere else, and they put somebody who has paid more money. They will rig the elections. It also now we have seen with this rise in populism. So populism as such, populism is not a good form of governance. We need democratic leaders. We don't need popular leaders as such. I'm not saying somebody should not be, lovable, but populism is an extreme form of being lovable. So that can also be very bad politics and reverse the democratic gains that Indonesia has made since it attained independence, and also since it has made some political reforms. Also some increase in polarization, polarization where everybody is polarized. By that, I mean that you take always extreme views. You take views that, the government is extremely bad, or you take views like the government is extremely good. You don't even criticize it, which is also terribly wrong, because we should also be independent thinkers. Armed conflict, atrocities in many countries, if you look at those countries that are still at war today, some of the wars are caused by corruption. They are fighting for resources, for example. Also, there is public frustration and cynicism. So you talk to young people, they'll tell you, if I finish my studies, I just want to go to another state. I just want to go to Jakarta. There's so much corruption here. Or I just want to go abroad because there's so much corruption in the country. So it leads to cynicism. You don't see anything positive about the state. You become always frustrated. So these are some of the political effects that corruption can have on the community, in our community. There's the economy, I'll just brush through. There's economic loss and inefficiency. So corruption is not the most efficient way of doing things. Imagine every time you pay extra money to get services, that's already like an added tax. So corruption makes things that would otherwise be cheaper, expensive, or even things that would otherwise be free, you have to pay for those things if there is a corrupt government or corrupt people. Then socially, so many other factors that can, corruption can contribute to in a negative way. Undermining the sustainable development goals, that has always been my favorite, because even under the sustainable development goals, I'm sure we are all aware of the sustainable development goals, colloquially known as the SDGs. There's SDG 16.4. It talks about corruption, fighting corruption. Also leads to poverty, as the speaker said, inequality. So you have people who are really super rich. You should watch that documentary that I put in the link, that it's only a very small percent that controls almost 90% of the wealth that we have in many societies. So it's just 1% of the population and they have 90% of the resources. So that's a really huge inequality. It also leads to impunity, injustice. In some cases, people who are rich, they are not subjected to the same standards as people who are just men of straw like myself. It can lead to terrorism, other crimes, because corruption is investing in crime, right? So you are corrupt, you invest that money back into crime, organized crime, destroys even our climate and biodiversity. And of course, corruption is a human rights violation in and of itself. So imagine stealing money that is meant to buy textbooks, that is meant to buy medicines. That would mean other people will not have access to their healthy facilities, access to education, and so forth and so on. So I'll quickly move because I can also sense that we are really running out of time, but I want to give us a little bit more so that we can finish with some reflection. Another aspect, I bring this aspect of measuring corruption, although it may not necessarily dovetail or links with the definition aspect, that is what we were dealing with today, but it is also very important that we know and understand the levels of corruption. So we can't just say corruption is there, is bad, and so forth, but how exactly do we know? So we need also to measure corruption, and this is another exercise that I'm already eager to announce in advance. Anita, if you can pardon me, I'm already eager to announce that we will also carry out some activity on measuring corruption this year. So measuring corruption, a very important aspect. If you want to understand it, you also have to measure and know how far, what risk does Indonesia face in terms of corruption, or how prevalent is corruption in Indonesia? Is it true that there is corruption? Maybe there's no corruption, who knows? So we need also to measure it. And there are different ways of measuring corruption, but also as with the definition, it's also very difficult. If you don't even agree on a definition, it is also very difficult then to agree on how to measure something that you actually cannot define. So here I've put some bullet points to explain how it has been always a challenge, to understand the scale and scope of corruption. We have, of course, different methods of measuring corruption that have been developed by international organizations, by scholars and practitioners, but they tend to be focusing on only narrow areas. I'll skip and go to the next part. Sometimes they detect only certain types of corruption that the designers are interested in finding out. So if you look at international organizations such as the World Bank, they are more interested in understanding international bribery because that's their business. They are an international bank. So they want to know what happens if a company comes to invest in Indonesia. So they are only interested in that. Their understanding or measurements of corruption will not help a common average person working in Makassar. It is too foreign for them. They are not interested in that. So different methods of measuring corruption, they come with different challenges, and also they also have their specialities or peculiarities. Okay. Having said that, you can actually divide different types of measurements into three categories. So we have the official statistics, where you just look at the statistics that are given to you by the local governments, national governments, federal governments. You also have the perception surveys. So here you're collecting perceptions, because remember, corruption is very difficult, happens in secrecy. What we can only have are perceptions sometimes. But there is also nowadays the experience-based surveys, which is something that we are actually intending on doing. So you actually measure the experiences. Have you ever paid a bribe, for example, things like that. But we also talk about the efficacy or the feasibility of measuring experiences. We can also divide the measurements of corruption into two. So the methods of measuring corruption, one is direct and the other one is indirect. Quite clear is the word, itself, direct. So this is the most direct way of trying to get an understanding of how prevalent corruption is in a given polity. So it's evidence-based. You collect information. You can do this either through statistical or other standardized procedures. So you go, you collect information from the local police station, for example, how many people have been arrested for the crime of corruption according to the criminal code of Indonesia. And you get all those data, you go, you collect the same in Bali, you do the same in other islands, and you come up with the measurement. So these are the levels of corruption. This is the most common form of corruption, etc. There are also indirect methods. And as I said, that it's not that they are useless. So corruption by itself, by nature, is very difficult. Corruption happens sometimes behind closed doors, drawn curtains, and if both parties are happy, nobody will ever know that corruption ever happened. I pay a bribe and I go my way. The receiver of the bribe goes his way or her way, and nobody will know. So that's why sometimes it's important to come up with these indirect methods of measuring corruption. And this could also be based on perceptions. As I said, sometimes you use perceptions like what Transparency International does. They collect perceptions. But again, I'll tell you more. Well, I think it's there already. Let's say, yeah, it's a survey of surveys. So they collect other people's surveys and then they try to come up with some perceptions of corruption. So there are composite ways of measuring corruption. So here we have the direct methods, and I've just talked about the perception surveys used internationally, but also again, the challenge is that with perceptions or indirect methods, you are not necessarily measuring corruption. You are measuring the proxy of what actual corruption is. So you ask people, about perceptions on something else, but not necessarily corruption. So in that way, you don't really get to understand exactly what are the levels of actual corruption in a given country, for example. Then they end up with these levels where they say some countries are more prone to corruption, whereas others are clean, that they don't need to do anything about it. That is actually wrong. And turning back to direct methods. So one of the most reliable, probably now the most reliable, is to have sample surveys. So you go into areas, you design a questionnaire, and then you come up with these surveys that can help you to understand the levels of corruption, which is what we are actually thinking of doing. There are also two other methods, or at least one other method, several other methods. Focus group discussions. Sometimes it's very difficult if you ask people one-on-one through a survey if they have experienced or have been involved in corruption. So you can put people in a certain group they are comfortable with, and then they can discuss. And that way you can also get to learn or understand corruption. There's what we've called the deaf message, a method rather. There where we have elite, people like yourselves, when you finish your studies, you become researchers, experts in corruption, then you can discuss, according to your expertise, your writings, you can also come up with almost accurate ways of measuring corruption. There are also interviews. You speak with those people, public officials. You speak with journalists involved in exposing corruption, judges involved in, interpreting the criminal code, anti-corruption organizations. We have, what is it called in Indonesia, KPK? Yeah. So these, you meet with those, and they also give you a very good understanding of corruption. And there are also some other additional one. I just put this slide because I wanted to challenge us that we already know some of the most common ones, the World Economic Forum. I talked about Transparency International, but there is also the Latino Barometer. There is the Euro Barometer, which measures corruption in Europe, Afro Barometer in Africa. There is not so far the World Asian Barometer. And this is actually a challenge to Anita and colleagues. Maybe we should also think about coming up with an Asia Barometer. Yeah, as universities, these are the best places where ideas come from. So in a way, this is in a nutshell the today's Studium Generale. If you connect all that what I've been saying, you could actually maybe come up with some methods, ways. But what I'll say is maybe take home is that it's important that we understand the relationship between corruption and other variables. Also corruption with things such as democracy, human rights, and so forth. That also helps us to have a better understanding of corruption. Now we have our criminal code that was passed this year, I'm told. We need now to sit down, analyze it in light of the literature that I shared, in light of the international covenants that bounds Indonesia, and then see which areas would need reform. A criminal code is a very good basis to start from, but also, there's still need for reforms where we can suggest amendment, policy changes. So this is now our role as students and also us as your teachers to keep analyzing these codes so that we come up with a better way of understanding corruption. We wanted to end with an exercise. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. So maybe just some reflection, but I hand back to our moderator, and thank you everybody for your attentive listening.
Okay, yes. Round of applause for Dr. Prosper. Thank you very much for the insightful materials. Before I conclude all of the materials for today, do you have any other questions to give to Dr. Prosper? Ada yang mau bertanya lagi? Silakan. Yes. Yes. Please. Is it obvious? Okay, Dr. Prosper, we still have students who wants to ask a question.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. And we also have a question in the chat box.
All right.
Yes. Okay. Yes, please, your name.
Thank you for. My name is Irgi Raja Ditama Baja dari kelas Delik D. I have a question is one point makes me interested was give to give. In Africa, it's big culture. In Indonesia also, give to give be part of. That's why give to give be part of crime of corruption. I have example, sir. One of government, let's say Bupati, because in Indonesia called Bupati, this man say, I have to do corruption. That's why I don't imagine I taking this job. I spend a lot of money and I taking this job for the winning of vote by people. And the salary for the job like this. In interested by me, he show the stroke of the salary in that video. You can see this video in YouTube maybe.
Okay.
My question is, what do you think? This Bupati say I have to do the corruption because he don't imagine that the salary of this job I spend a lot of money and I taking this job for me is bad, the salary is bad.
Okay.
Why you what do you think this for this
Okay.
this man.
Okay.
This Bupati.
So,
Thank you, sir.
Prosper, allow me to make it more clearer. So
Okay.
Irgi asked, what do you think? Because there is a case in Indonesia where a regent of a state yes, a region of the regency that openly said that I have to do the corruption because I have spent a lot more than this to become a region himself. And then, yeah, what do you think about that? Yes.
Yeah, very interesting. So two ways. Again, also this is my well, it's almost like an opinion that is a bit personal, but also professional somehow based on my reading. One, if you campaign for a job, right? You campaign to become the regional leader, and he used his personal funding for this. He was not forced to do so. Yeah, and then when you get there, if they pay you 2 cents or if they whatever they pay you, you voluntarily were in. If it's not enough, you can also go out. Yeah, you don't get in there to get this. The motive is not to gain economic or personal gain. That's why in some countries, it's also a requirement that before you join a certain position, you should have already amassed a certain amount of money yourself. I want to put it differently. If it is a job, let's say a security guard working at the Parliament House building in Jakarta, and he is being paid money that is not even enough for him to come to work, and he is taking bribes, that could be a justification, actually, that I'm being corrupt because the money that I'm getting paid is not even enough for me to come to work. And this is somebody who is a man of means. This is the only job that he has. If he doesn't come to work or find this job, he will die of hunger because there is nothing else. There are actually some writings that this sort of corruption is a violation of the right that is being called the freedom from corruption, that pay us well so that we don't become corrupt. So that is quite different. But when it comes to people who are already rich enough, people who have means, and they also voluntarily assume government position, you don't have to use a government position to have access to riches. If you think that is not working for you, you resign and you consider it a loss, the amount of money you spend campaigning. So that is clearly corruption. And then lastly, I'll say that corruption, by the way, is a crime that is easy to justify. So people have always come up with these different ways of justifying corruption. One of the odd ways was that, okay, yes, there's corruption, but it's not like somebody's dead. But that was back then when it was not clear that corruption could actually lead to death. Corruption kills. If you steal money that is meant to buy medication, people will die. And also there was an issue that who is the victim if money is stolen? Your money is still there in the account. So some people say, yes, the government, you say it's stealing, but if I deposit money, it's still in there in my account. My money has not been stolen. We are also victims anyhow of corruption. You may not see it directly, and some people use that as a justification because corruption, by the way, it's a crime that is easy to justify, but it still is bad, it's terrible, it's corruption, it's rotten, and it's corrupcy, you know. Yeah, thank you. And in the chat box, I think there is something.
Yes, I can. Should I read to you? Okay, let me read it for you so the other student can hear that. So there is a question from Kayatul Mualima. If we look at the current punishment system, especially in Indonesia, it no longer uses a system of retaliation, but a modern form of punishment, namely recovery, or I think it's mean that restoration, yeah. So that after becoming 8, there is a change for the better. We often refer to this as restorative. Given this condition, I am in a situation with the latest motion that has come out to the public regarding the right to forget guilt that must be realized after leaving prison. So the question arises whether it can be applied to criminal acts of corruption regarding the right to be forgotten for former corruptors, so that when he leaves the penitentiary, he has the right to forget his mistake, so that after that he can lead a normal life, such as not being treated by society, especially with regard to the right to be elected in general election, no more waiting for 5 years. Thank you, and ask for guidance from you. Yes.
Okay, great, interesting, very interesting aspects, by the way. I really like that. So, you know, like there is always there is need to come up with new ways of fighting corruption. Previously, we have been fighting corruption as a crime, only as a crime from the criminal perspective, using punitive measures. But now we see that the doors are opening also to include restorative, measures, which is actually good, going after the assets themselves, because then that way a person will atone for their sins. If I've stolen from the state 5 million and then I pay back 5 million in my assets and other money that is left, that is also good. So everything goes back to equilibrium, to the normal. However, you know, the question is quite being too specific, especially with the number of years that somebody should wait and so forth. That is really, each case should be dealt with on its own merit. I can imagine that if somebody has stolen so many billions of dollars, you may not even want them anywhere near the government pace. This can be a lifetime thing, ban. And I don't think that is unjustified. If somebody is a big time embezzler, and then it's very difficult for people to have trust, again, that we can trust that person with so much. But if you were in a situation where you were forced, somehow you were in a desperate situation and you accepted quite a modest amount of money, of course, after a certain period of time of reform, then you can also be involved in other, you know, you could be allowed to come back in certain areas. So this matter, every case should be treated, you know, in its own circumstances. There's no one size fits all, but what I can say is I agree so much that we need to refocus the way we were fighting corruption, looking also at restorative justice. But not only that, corruption should not only be a criminal aspect. So the criminal aspect is already reactory. We are now just reacting to the crime of corruption. We should also look at other aspects, try to prevent it from happening in the first place. So that's also another very important aspect that I think those who drafted the code should also really be, helped to see if they could make some legal reforms on how to focus on retributive methods of punishing, be it corruptors or any other crime. But corruption, by the way, is also not very different. When it comes to crimes, it's also not very different from other crimes. We should also still apply those principles of legality when dealing with people who are suspected of committing corruption or who have even been convicted of corruption. They still should be afforded their rights. It's not just about the rights of the victims. It's also about the rights of the perpetrators of corruption. They are still humans and can be reformed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Prosper. I think I should conclude our meetings for today because the time. Yeah. But before I give it back to Master of Ceremony, I would like to conclude our meetings for today. Jadi let me conclude it in bahasa, Dr. Prosper. Jadi saya simpulkan 5 menit ya. Jadi dari materi tadi, secara umum kita dapat mengetahui bahwa konsep korupsi adalah perilaku tidak jujur atau curang oleh mereka yang berkuasa. Walaupun undang-undang telah mengatur tentang pengertian korupsi, tapi standar hukum secara global tentunya berbeda-beda ya. Namun pengertian yang diusulkan oleh NGO yang banyak diterima secara global yaitu penyalahgunaan kekuasaan yang dipercayakan kepadanya. Jadi dalam hal ini NGO dia tidak membatasi kalau korupsi itu dilakukan oleh public official ya. Itu menurut NGO. Jadi pengertiannya tidak terbatas kepada jabatan. Jadi fokusnya adalah tentang penyalahgunaan kekuasaan yang dipercayakan kepadanya. Ya. Kemudian kita tadi telah mendapatkan informasi tentang efek-efek korupsi ada di bidang ekonomi ya berupa kerugian ekonomi, kegagalan pada pembangunan infrastruktur, ada juga korupsi mempengaruhi di bidang politik seperti kerugian pribadi, intimidasi ya, ketidaknyamanan di sektor publik dan swasta, kecurangan ekonomi dan sistem politik. Kemudian yang terakhir ada sosial ya, pengrusakan yang berkelanjutan, kemiskinan dan ketidaksetaraan dan pelanggaran HAM ya. Itu adalah beberapa efek-efek yang bisa ditimbulkan oleh korupsi. Yang paling penting yang diusulkan oleh Prosper hari ini adalah tentang pengukuran korupsi ya. Jadi kita sebagai mahasiswa hukum itu bisa melakukan penelitian secara mandiri untuk mengukur korupsi ya, karena sekarang sudah banyak sekali alat atau tools untuk melakukan pengukuran korupsi ya. Jadi ada beberapa metode tadi, ada metode secara langsung dengan menggunakan laporan kasus, survei dan sampel data. Kemudian ada metode tidak langsung juga yang bisa didasarkan dari pendapat warga negara, perwakilan bisnis, pegawai negeri dan pemangku kepentingan ya. Jadi mungkin ini bisa menjadi salah satu ide kalian untuk menulis skripsi ya. Kalian bisa melakukan penelitian tentang bagaimana mengukur korupsi misalnya di daerah terdekat kita ya. Nah, karena banyak sekali sekarang alat yang dapat digunakan untuk mengukur hal tersebut ya. Jadi secara keseluruhan itulah materi dari Dr. Prosper. Nanti akan saya share kembali the PowerPoints. Can I share it to the students, Dr. Prosper?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Yeah.
and remember to do the homeworks that on the PowerPoints.
Ya, jadi ada homeworknya di bagian belakang. Is it about sorry, what is it? In the last page?
There's the exercise 2 and 3.
Okay, 2 and 3 ya. So
Yes.
jadi di PowerPoint itu ada 2 latihan, ada 2 tugas yang harus dilakukan. Ada tentang efek korupsi ya. Exercise 2. Jadi kalian coba nonton itu videonya dan ada ininya ya, ada student harus menulis tentang paper ya yang mendescribe tentang pemahaman mereka tentang korupsi dan kekayaan ya. Nah, kemudian tolong dinonton nanti itu linknya. Nah, kemudian ada yang terakhir adalah tentang story ya, Dr. Prosper, is it?
Yes, in my story.
Oke,
Yeah.
my story ya. Jadi yang ini tadi yang seperti yang saya bilang, bagaimana korupsi mempengaruhi kalian atau seseorang yang kalian kenal. Oke, jadi tugasnya nanti dikirimkan dalam bentuk ketua kelasnya bisa membuat link apa sih namanya Google Docs ya. Nanti dikirimkan ke situ semua papernya dan untuk masing-masing kelas. Oke? Any last questions? Udah ya? Okay, thank you very much once again for Dr. Prosper. I will, they definitely going to finish their paper. Do you have any deadline for them?
Well, let's give them what's more accurate. What usually do we give each to students?
Actually, it's a week. Yeah, because
Yes,
they
then
have-
in a week.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
I will send it the Google Docs for all of their answers to the assignments.
Oh, thank you so much. That would be very helpful. Just one more question.
Yes.
Is this the same group that is going to attend the next session?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. So I will send the exercise for the next session in time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Prosper. Once again, let me get back to Master of Ceremony.
Thank you.
All right, before we come to the end of the sessions, we would like to give the token of appreciations to our amazing speaker, Dr. Prosper S. Maguchu.
Sebelum kita sampai pada akhir sesi ini, kami ingin memberikan sertifikat sebagai tanda terima kasih kami kepada pembicara kita yang luar biasa, Dr. Prosper S. Maguchu, LL.M.
Oh, nice.
Finally, we've come to the last agenda in this activity, that is closing. Let's close today's activity by reciting Hamdalah.
Akhirnya, sampailah kita pada agenda terakhir dalam kegiatan ini, yaitu penutup. Mari kita tutup kegiatan ini dengan mengucapkan hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin.
We would like to thank all of the participants who have attended this afternoon. We apologize if there are any intentional or unintentional wrongdoings during this event. We sincerely hope that any lessons we got today can be useful for the future.
Kami mengucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh peserta yang telah hadir pada siang hari ini. Kami mohon maaf apabila ada kesalahan yang disengaja maupun tidak disengaja dalam pelaksanaan kegiatan ini. Semoga pelajaran yang kita dapatkan hari ini dapat bermanfaat di masa yang akan datang. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Santi Santi Om.
Greetings to all of us and see you in the next agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prosper. See you again next